Broadcasting the information the mainstream media won't touch. This is The Richie Allen Show in association with DavidIke.com.
Our first guest is patiently standing by. He's a former barrister and immigration judge and the author of the best-selling book Spy Hunter. Phenomenally brilliant book. I can't recommend it highly enough. Well, we believe him to be a renowned national security and intelligence expert. When I mentioned he was coming back on the programme, many of you sent me questions, interesting questions and thought-provoking questions that we will put to him between now and the top of the hour. Let's welcome back to the show our friend Michael Shrimpton. Michael, welcome back. How are you?
Well, I'm fine, thanks. How are you?
I'm not too shabby. Our cricket team is not having a great tour in the subcontinent in India, but other than that, Michael, we're not doing too bad.
Well, that's probably because you got the wrong captain, and of course we left the best batsman home in England. So when you leave your best batsman home in England and you appoint the wrong captain, you kind of you're going to lose test matches.
You're hamstringing yourself before you even begin. Yeah, it's going to be an interesting last couple of tests. Listen, it's always brilliant to have you on. I'm going to do something a bit different. In terms of you and I, often we have these conversations and they're interesting. I love getting your insight. But to be fair to the audience, I'm going to jump straight in there with questions they wanted me to put to you. And one of the first questions they wanted me to put to you was, you, of course, would have, like ourselves, campaigned for the United Kingdom to leave the European Union for obvious reasons. And all manner of things have happened in the last few weeks, with former prime ministers coming out saying that, there is a path to a second referendum. Philip Hammond said today, we might be even prepared to pay to stay in the single market, and all this nonsense. And because of that, several listeners sincerely tweeted me to ask you, are our politicians under the jackboot of corruption, of bribery, of intimidation and blackmail maybe, by agents in Europe who will do anything to keep the UK in the European Union? What do you think?
Yes.
How did they do that? How, though?
Well, the Germans are very good at both blackmail and bribery. Blackmail is fairly straightforward. They tend to spot people when they're young. They're very good at talent spotting. That's how they captured Edward Heath. He was also short of money before World War II, so they were paying him £250 a year, or the Reichsmark equivalent. That he was recruited at Belial not long after he went up. That was in the last few months of 1937. In fact, Heath went to Nuremberg I think it was at Nuremberg for the party rally in 37. So he was recruited and spotted very, very quickly. And this is what they do. They talent spot, and they tend to grab particularly gays or people who are sleeping around if they're married. They get them at a very young age, and then they're positioned to blackmail them. If they're into young boys or girls, if they're paedophiles, which Heath was, then they supply them with boys or girls, as the case may be, and from that moment on, they are hopelessly and utterly compromised. And that's why we have this investigation into Heath, which Wiltshire Constabulary are running at the moment.
And I have questions on that for you in a minute, particularly about Dr. Rachel Hoskins. I'm sure you're expecting me to put a question about some of the comments she's been making.
She's a rather silly woman who breached her contract and tried to undermine the Wiltshire inquiry by dobbing it into the Daily Mail or the Mail on Sunday. Yes.
Yeah, and do you know what? You and I believe in freedom of speech, and we believe in the rights of people to have their opinion. And I wouldn't deny that to Rachel Hoskins. But I did mention on this programme, Michael, and I'm sure you'll agree with it. You and I agree on most things when it comes to this subject. She has gotten dangerously close to possibly, an argument might be made that she maybe should be looked at for perverting the course of justice.
Well, it's not so much perverting the course of justice. I query whether she had the right to comment. She was brought in by the police as an expert, and I think paid, and I think she was under contract. Now, I can't be sure, I haven't seen the contract, but if she was, then almost certainly there would have been a confidentiality clause in the contract. So I was frankly surprised when somebody drew the Mail on Sunday's article to my attention on Sunday morning. But whether she breached confidence or not, I suspect that she did, but so she may not have done. Whether she breached confidence or not, what she was saying was gibberish.
No.
There's no doubt that Nick, the source that she was condemning, is an unreliable source. I think I have long taken the view that Nick was a plant. The Met fell for Nick. Well, they might not have done. They might have known he was a plant as well. But either they fell for Nick or they knew he was a plant and went along with it. They then built up Nick's credibility, which was completely ridiculous. And then they went off and arrested, or rather searched Field Marshal Lord Bramall's house. Absolutely ridiculous. I met Gwyn Bramall. He's a lovely man. There's no way in the world he was a paedophile. It's absolutely ridiculous. The allegations against Gwyn Bramall were based largely, I think, on assertions by this character, Nick. The Bramall allegation was a complete farce. The whole purpose of searching Lord Bramall's home was in order to damage the Heath investigation and the investigation into Leon Britton, and one or two others. Now, it's a standard German intelligence tactic. If you have good intelligence, you put up somebody who's a fake who says the same thing, and you try and damage the good intelligence by exposing the fake. It's a standard ploy.
It's a standard ploy, right? And my friend and colleague David has been writing about this for years. Let me put this to you then. Now, we don't do sensationalism, and we don't, make claims that we can't substantiate. But we understand that, we understand from what we've learned and what David has learned through his life, almost a lifetime of experience looking into it, that the paedophile network is massive. And yes, it's all pervasive in society. So do we believe, or do we think there's grounds to believe, that senior diplomats, senior ministers today have been or are involved in the abuse of children and are still being blackmailed? It's still being held over them in order for this European Union Nazi project to proceed.
Oh, yes. I mean, I'm aware of several Europhiles. Oh, yeah. I'm aware of the names of several Europhiles.
Don't mention them now. I know I don't have to say that to you now. I know you won't do that. I know you're not an idiot, yeah. Listen, sorry if I insult you. I know you're a barrister. You're not an idiot, but I'm just going to jump in there and say that. I'd say it to anybody. So, Michael, it's definitely going on.
Definitely. And that is partly why Brexit is being dragged out. The Germans are obviously putting pressure on assets in London. However, I don't think they're going to succeed. I think Theresa May will stick to it's politically impossible for Theresa May to resign from the March deadline that she's imposed on herself. The case that starts on Monday isn't going to upset the timetable, I think, either way. I think the appeal will have to be allowed. It may not be allowed by a majority, but I think it may not be allowed unanimously, but I think a majority of the Supreme Court will allow the appeal. So I think Brexit will go ahead. The problem is, of course, that many of Theresa May's cabinet, including Philip Hammond, who is an idiot, no offence intended, are committed to single market membership to the point where Hammond is even prepared to blow public money on joining or staying in a market which is running to a deficit of something like £75 billion in 2016 in the favour of the EU. It's absolute nonsense. With the last thing we want to do is to stay in the single market.
Of course, yeah.
It's almost one-way traffic.
Well, the thing about, of course, the single market is, you and I have spoken about this before, all the credible evidence points to the UK hasn't done better with its EU trading partners over the years. In fact, it's declined in terms of its exports to these countries. It's all lies. And by the way, we must point out, every single one of the senior politicians who went with Brexit or went with Remain, they all made it pretty clear from the beginning there would be no single market. So they're lying now, saying that people didn't understand it. Michael, you and I have till the top of the hour, so I want to move on with these questions. Without naming names, and again, don't think I'm insulting you. You're a far brighter man than me, but I've got to say that because I don't have much money. I don't want to be sued. You and I've been hearing a lot in the last few weeks about very senior politicians in DC, and we've heard about something called Pizzagate. Now, without naming names, I'm going to mention John Podesta and his brother Tony Podesta because we can mention that they've been named on television in the United States. We know, of course, about the Franklin Credit Union scandal. We know about paedophile networks running at the highest levels of power in America for years. What about this Pizzagate, Michael? What do you think of it? What's happening?
Well, it's interesting. What particularly interested me was the Podesta brothers can be placed in the Algarve, fairly close to where Madeleine McCann was kidnapped. Absolutely not suggesting for one moment that either of the brothers was involved in the kidnapping. I'm sure they weren't. We can rule them out solidly from involvement in the kidnap because we know who the kidnap team were. The kidnap team was a team of 3. It's all set out in Appendix 8 of Spy Hunter, if anybody's interested in the McCann murder and kidnap. And quite clearly, even less were they involved in the murder of Madeleine McCann, which was in Belgium in 2008, when, as far as I know, neither Podesta brother was in the country at the time. So we can rule them out from involvement in the kidnap or the murder. However, I think there are questions to be answered here. Firstly, why were they in the Algarve at that particular juncture, and why did they leave the following day? Why did they move out of the country so quickly following the kidnap? Because that doesn't appear to have been a scheduled departure from Portugal.
Those police sketches, Michael, look remarkably like them. Now, look, I know you can look at a sketch and you can see what you want to see, and I know there are some people in the independent media, they speak without thinking. But those sketches,
I'm a bit wary of I think we have to be very, very careful. Again, it's so easy for people to the Podesta brothers are, they're prominent. They're closely associated with Hillary Clinton. It's very easy to lumber the Podesta brothers with involvement in the McCann kidnap.
I'm not trying to do that at all. I'm with you. I wouldn't. Why should they be suspected? Not at all. I'm just saying it is funny that the people who make 2 and 2 and they come up with 10, which unfortunately is a lot of the independent media. To give them their little bit of due, it's probably an uncanny coincidence. Well, but there is that similarity, right?
It damages the independent media. I think I would encourage everybody to keep their feet on the ground. To obviously read Spy Hunter. You was kind of described as best-selling. You may know more about the sales figures for the last quarter.
Right,
I have to look at my latest royalty check.
So Michael, just to go back to that, do those emails then, do you think, are they, a little window onto that seedy, horrible world of child abuse? Is that what those emails hint at?
I think so. Yes. I mean, I think there's more to Pizzagate than just pepperoni. I don't think the pizzas being referred to are purely pepperoni or even ham and pineapple. I think there's something there that's got to be looked at. But I'm proceeding cautiously, and bear in mind I haven't had a lot of time to devote to examining Pizzagate. And I've been concentrating more on the election of Donald Trump, which I predicted in my column on Veterans Today. Didn't take me by surprise. It was perfectly clear he was going to win. And I said so right from the moment he was selected as the Republican candidate. He was the best placed Republican to beat Hillary Clinton.
You beat me. I was convinced that the cabal wanted her in for reasons of, increasing tension and ultimately, provoking a conflict with Russia. Let me just ask you another question. And then there's so many questions have come in. Here's the question for you. The paedophile networks of incredibly powerful people operating in DC and elsewhere in America, are they connected to paedophile networks working out of the UK and in Europe? Are these people connected?
Yes, because the high-level paedophile rings, it's a German tactic. It's an exclusively German tactic. No other intelligence agency in the world other than the DVD and its affiliates like Korea Group in Frankfurt and GO2 in London, no other agency runs organized paedophile rings. It's a disgusting tactic. It's morally wrong, but it's also an incredibly dangerous tactic. It very nearly blew up in the DVD's face when they kidnapped Madeleine McCann. Obviously, the people who did the kidnap were not German nationals. They were, in fact, Spanish. And they got across the frontier fairly quickly. I think they've probably since been taken out by their own side. But that was completely stupid. If you put aside the immorality of it and the illegality of it and the heartache of it, kidnap of she was 4 when she was kidnapped, turned 5 shortly afterwards. It put aside the horror and the illegality and the sheer immorality of kidnapping a 4-year-old girl for sex, with a view to murdering her in a snuff movie after she's been abused by a senior official of the European Commission in Brussels. That was the plan. Obviously, I'm not identifying the official. No. Obviously, I know who the official was. And he was identified by email traffic because Madeleine McCann's photograph was sent to him, and he selected her from a group, I understand, of 3. And the email with the JPEG files of the photographs went to a private email account of this official in Brussels, and that was intercepted by those very nice people, the National Security Agency at Minwith Hill. So we know, so putting aside the immorality of it, purely from an objective intelligence professional's point of view, the operation was reckless. It was stupid. The DVD were lucky to get away with it. They were lucky that Leicestershire police were handed the investigation. Now, they were able to arrange that because the Cabinet Office, once the Cabinet Office knew that Madeleine McCann was going to be kidnapped, was going to be abused by a senior official in Brussels, Michael, the Cabinet Office made sure that Leicestershire police were put in charge of the investigation.
Now, that's interesting. I've read your account of it, and I find it very interesting, and I find it compelling. That's not in any way to patronise you at all. I find your account of it compelling. You have some circumstantial evidence, and I'm very interested in it. I've heard other accounts as well that I find interesting and compelling. I don't know what's going on with Madeleine McCann, but let me ask you this. Why did they specifically want that child?
Well, she was chosen.
Again, being careful now, knowing that the McCanns are litigious and everything else.
The official involved was male. That's as far as I can go. The official involved was male. His particularly sick sexual interest was in young blonde girls. So she matched his requirements.
So it was an order. It was like a catalogue order for a child. Then.
Correct. The spotter, and we know, again, I'm not identifying. I know who the spotter was. The spotter in Praia de Luz was instructed to get photographs of young blonde girls. What is unclear, and what has never been clear in the McCann case, is whether or not the official in question knew of her identity and nationality. I suspect he didn't. I don't know if he had specified that he wanted a British toddler to rape. He may, so far as I know, the requirement was for young toddlers aged about 5 who were blonde. I don't think it was specifically targeted at the UK. It might have been, but I don't think so. I think there was a cock-up. I think that her identity wasn't made sufficiently clear, and what you've got is photographs going in with no biographical data. And I think she was selected from a photograph. The email that went to him didn't, so far as I know, contain biographical data, or very, very little.
Right, okay.
It might have contained a first name, and that was it. I would be surprised if it was known in Brussels when she was selected for abuse that she was British. The spotter undoubtedly knew who she was, but that information may not have gone. It may have gone to the paedophile ring, but I'm not sure if it went from the paedophile ring to the ultimate abuser. So it's unclear as to who knew what in Brussels when the decision was taken to go ahead with the kidnap. MI6, I can tell you, were absolutely horrified. MI6 head of station was ordered out of Lisbon down to Praia de Luz within 24 hours. I mean, virtually straight away. And 6 had a handle on this, that they obviously got hold of the email traffic from GCHQ. NSA copied it to GCHQ. GCHQ passed it over to 6. 6, within about 36 hours, 6 had a very clear idea of what had gone on. The kidnap was on Thursday night. I was brought in over the weekend. I was anxious about it. It actually inspired a novel, apparently. The kidnap was on the evening of a local authority by-election, and I'd won the by-election for the parish council on Watermead, where I used to live. And when I had to go and sign my papers some weeks later at the first parish council meeting following the by-election, I created a casual vacancy because we'd actually had a breakthrough in the kidnap case that evening. And although it was, I put some effort into the by-election, by the time I got down there to sign the papers, it was 11:15, everybody had gone home, and I thereby I took a deliberate decision that the McCann case took priority. That then created a casual vacancy. Now, one of the people who offered a reward was J.K. Rowling. J.K. Rowling then wrote a book called The Casual Vacancy, which was her first sort of non-Harry Potter novel. and it seems to have been, apparently, I don't know if this is true or not, you'd have to ask J.K. Rowling, but apparently it was inspired by those events. I certainly reached out to J.K. Rowling's office, but J.K. Rowling and I never spoke and never communicated directly. The communication was with her agent or secretary, I think it was, up in Edinburgh. But there are, I can recognize Watermead from the fictional Pagford. I mean, there are anybody who knows Watermead will be able to sort of recognize that there's more than one point of similarity between the fictional town and village in the book and Watermead and Aylesbury.
This is fascinating stuff, by the way. We've got Michael Shrimpton on the line. It's exactly 17 and a half minutes to the top of the hour. Just to finish with this for the moment, and we might do a show sometime on the McCann thing. And
you're happy to, yeah.
Yeah, and you'll have plenty of time, and we can go through it slowly, because I know people will be getting lost listening to this, as I'm getting lost, and I've read Spy Hunter, and I've spoken to you before about it. Just before we move on to questions about the former French minister and Syria and how far back that was planned, how far ahead do they plan to take children, these sickos? I mean, could it have been the case, and this is coming from my producer Claire, by the way, who's listening obviously in Ireland, could it be the case that Madeleine was ordered while she was still in the UK?
No, I don't think.
I think so. No?
Possible, but I don't think so. The first photograph of Madeleine, the JPEG file that went into Brussels, was apparently taken at Sagres Beach a couple of days before. It was actually taken out on the weekend. They flew out to Portugal, I think from memory it was the Saturday. Bear in mind, listeners, just bear with me, I haven't worked on this case for some time. We're going back now to 2007, so we're going back 9 years. But the first, as far as I know, the first photograph taken of her was only a couple of days beforehand. There are the holiday was arranged in England some months before, but I don't think Madeleine was targeted from England. I don't believe it's possible. I'm not ruling it out, but I don't believe she was.
We've got too many questions to get through, but I want to just focus for the next few minutes. We did say that we would, you and I spoken so many times before. We're aware that programs like ours do sometimes attract people who listen because they don't like us. That's a good thing, because if their minds are closed to this information, they might hear something presented in a way that they might take a second look at it. I mentioned to you today, and you know all about this, that in recent years, the former French Foreign Minister Roland Dumas has been saying that when he was in the UK in 2009, the intelligence agencies here approached him and told him that they planned to overthrow Bashar al-Assad. Now, what do you think of that? What do you think about him and his credibility? I've looked over him as best as I can, his career, what he's been saying, what he hasn't been saying. He's pissed off the Israelis once or twice over the years. He's been a pro-Palestinian politician, but he's telling the truth, isn't he? Well, we know what's happened in Syria, so he must be telling the truth, right?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I mean, I hold no brief for Monsieur Dumas. You're right; he's pro-Palestinian. I'm pro-Israeli. He was, even though he's a French foreign minister, it may sound strange to say it, but even though he was a former foreign minister of France, I think he was telling the truth. I think he is telling the truth. Yes.
So what we have in Syria, and we've been speaking today about the US aid-funded and NATO-funded white helmets, which predominantly hang around in areas controlled by al-Nusra or al-Qaeda, or even ISIS themselves. What we have here is an absolutely monumental propaganda operation, right, against the people of the UK, Ireland, France, Germany, Switzerland, Belgium, to convince us that the carnage is so bad, that the Russians and the Syrians are such bastards, that we need to intervene, we need to have a no-fly zone, or we need to do something even more drastic than that. That's what's going on with these white helmets. It's obvious who they're funded by. We're looking at George Soros, USAID, people like that, right?
Yeah, well, the white helmets are not pure humanitarians. The white helmets are involved in setting up the Israelis in a disgraceful incident back in 2005 in Lebanon. The white helmets are operatives. Now, I mean, there may be one or two white helmets who are there purely for the humanitarian motive, but most of them are not. Now, Syria, let's be slightly careful, Syria. First point is it's a mess. I wouldn't start from here.
No, but it was fine. It was fine back in the late 2000s when the United Nations said that it was meeting all of its millennium or millennial goals. Lovely place. Assad got in because his father died. Because his brother died and couldn't take the job. Assad said from the word go, an ophthalmologist who spent a lot of time in London, I'm going to reform this kind of autocratic system or theocratic system, whatever.
Well, yeah, he's an Arab fascist.
He was doing it, but according to who? According to CNN and CNBC?
Well, no, he is. I mean, he is an Arab fascist dictator. There's no doubt about it. He's a bad guy. He always was. He's a bit nicer than his old man, but his old man was a pretty seriously bad guy. The Ba'ath Party, as I explained in Spy Hunter, the Ba'ath Party was established in the 1930s as an offshoot of the Nazi Party. The Ba'ath Party has nothing to do with democracy or human rights. It never has been. Both Syria and Iraq were Ba'athist dictatorships. The Ba'ath Party in Iraq and Syria were simply branches of the same organization. They were both set up by the Abwehr, and they were modeled on the Nazi Party. Bashar al-Assad isn't a Nazi, but he comes out of a party that was set up by German intelligence. The Germans were all over Syria and Iraq like a rash. They sponsored the 41 coup against the king in Iraq, and they were also fighting. Of course, you had the battles in 41 in Syria between the Free French and the Vichyists, and the Ba'ath Party were on the side of the Vichyists. So there was a close relationship between the Baathists and Vichy. So the guy's a scumbag, no offense intended.
I don't agree with you. There's no evidence to support that.
Oh, yeah, he is. But the
guy is a doctor who reluctantly ascended to the highest office in the country because of his brother's death.
Let
me just ask you this. Listen, you know I love you, but I'm going to argue with you. Listen, Michael, let me finish this point. You know full well that this guy was, when he ascended to the highest office, as I said, he was welcomed universally around the world, universally welcomed because he was a reformer. And everything he did from 2000 up until 2009 were the actions of a reformer, everything. To the point, as I said, and you can't deny it, that the United Nations said he's meeting his millennial goals. It's a wonderful place to be. It's a wonderful place for women to be. Healthcare is brilliant. They don't owe any money. It's a beacon of light in the region, right?
It was a beacon of light compared to Iran. Yes, I mean, in comparative terms, if you compare it to Iran, then yes, Woodland are better.
A country destroyed by BP and by the CIA and by MI5.
Yes.
Right. Don't say yes like that. Whatever problems Iran has now, they go right back to, again, 1953, Mohammad Mossadegh, not unlike Bashar al-Assad, a reformer, a guy who'd nationalised Iran's assets. We went in there and said, to hell with that, let's destroy the country, right?
Well, yeah, the Germans overthrew Mossadegh and used assets inside CIA and MI6. You must remember in 1953, when Mossadegh was overthrown, CIA was under German control. Walter Beadle-Smith gave way. It was a German asset. Worked closely with Eisenhower in World War II. It was another German asset. Beadle-Smith gives way in 1953 to Alan Dulles. Well, Dulles, we call him Von Dulles in the intelligence community. You have German assets in control of the CIA and German assets in control. I'm not sure Sir John Sinclair, who was then the head of MI6, I wouldn't describe him as a German asset, but he was the protege of a German asset, Sir Stuart Minges. And I think Minges selected Sinclair because he was an idiot. The Germans didn't have an asset to take over MI6, so they did what they often do, which indeed they did with the first director of MI6, Mansfield Cumming. They selected somebody who wasn't terribly bright. Easily be manipulated.
You know, we disagree on this. You know that I believe that the evidence is there. The CIA have their paw prints all over the Ba'ath Party, not to mention that the Iran-Iraq war was started by the CIA, was started by former Defense Secretary, soon to be Defense Secretary again, Donald Rumsfeld, by giving a blank check to Saddam to bomb the absolute bloody smithereens out of the Iranians in revenge for the revolution in 1979. This is all true, right? You know this to be true.
Hang on, whoa. I don't think
you're speaking to somebody now. Listen, you might be a barrister. I majored in history. I know my history.
Yep. Well, again, the problem is that you've got false flags. I have absolutely no doubt the CIA were all over the Ba'ath Party like a rash, but of course the CIA are heavily penetrated by the Germans, and at various times in the agency's history have actually been run by German assets. So the mere fact the CIA may be involved in the Mossadegh assassination, involved in discussions with Saddam, et cetera, doesn't necessarily mean very much. You have to ask who in the CIA, good guy CIA, white hat CIA, or black hat CIA. In many cases, in fact, what you're looking at is not CIA as such, but career group. German assets inside the agency.
This is where again you and I disagree, because I can agree with that. There are certain people with good motives. We've had Ray McGovern on this program dozens of times. We like Ray. There are people, of course, in these organizations who are not evil bastards. But
no, CIA are great people.
They're not great people. All roads ultimately lead to Nathan Rothschild. And we've spoken at length, you and I, before about the Frankfurt Rothschilds. This is where it all, we argue about these groups, the German intelligence, Mossad, CIA, MI5. All of them are getting their orders through central banks, who get their orders through the Rothschild, Rockefeller, Warburg cartel. It is. Well, you know this to be true.
All those three banking groups are connected to German intelligence. Warburg was the brother of the head of German intelligence. Warburg's brother was head of German intelligence. The German Rothschilds have been close to German intelligence since the 18th century, go back to the old German states before the formation of the German Empire. And the same with the Rockefellers, a German-American family. The Rockefellers have always been close to Germany. So you've got all the groups that you've mentioned are groups that have a close relationship with Germany. The Rothschilds.
But those groups, can I just jump in there again, Mike? Those groups, I mean, years ago, my friend and colleague was laughed out of town and ridiculed for suggesting to John Ronson on a Channel 4 television program that it can be easily demonstrated how a small group of men basically control the daily lives of 6.5-7 billion people. And that is absolutely true. These families we're talking about, I would say these bloodlines, because they intermarry with one another, they marry in and out of the European royal families,
fair,
right?
Fair comment, right? The description bloodlines is perfectly acceptable. You've definitely got a Rothschild bloodline.
So they control German intelligence then? They have to, by definition.
No, it's more complicated than that. German intelligence effectively controls offshore banking, and that's where the banks make their money. That's how they were able to set up the 2008 crash. The impetus for the 2008 crash came out of Frankfurt. So the relationship it's more one of mutual interdependence between the banking families and German intelligence.
You box very clever, Michael. And again, I'm not patronising you. You're one of the brightest guys that's ever come on this programme. You box very clever. I believe that you know damn well when you say Germans, you mean Rothschilds. That's who it is. That's where it goes, right?
Well, again, the Rothschilds are split into three. You've got the French Rothschilds, who are fairly pleasant, the British Rothschilds, who are nice, and the German Rothschilds, who are scumbags.
They're all scumbags, Michael.
No, actually, they're not. No,
they are.
Rothschild was a nice chap.
They're murderers and scumbags, and they're part of. And I know you write for Veterans Today, so you'll be rubbing shoulders with people who agree with me. These people, have a long-term and a long-planned global plan for a single government, for a unified global government, and out of that, ultimately, a depopulation agenda. So they're not nice people, these people.
No, they're not. No. And you're right. There's undoubtedly a depopulation agenda. There has been since Mengele wrote that idiotic thesis back in the late 1700s. Yes, and you've got the Vatican connection as well. And you've got the Jesuits involved. So and I don't rubbish people who don't agree with me.
No, and neither do I. And I hope I'm not giving that impression. Neither do I. I have the utmost respect for you. And you've moved in these circles. You
and I engaged in a search for the truth.
Absolutely right. Yeah. God, no, I don't disrespect you at all. Can I just ask you to do something for me, which I think will be a great help? The scale of the child abuse, Michael. I know when we first spoke, we touched on it. When the future Mrs. Allen or myself or our friends in this radio show, Jamie, Gareth, David, Claire, Jean-Ann, all of us that work on the programme, when we talk to people and we try and give them an idea of the scale of it, they can't get their heads around it. They don't want to. Give people an idea of the scale of global paedophile rings run by the rich and powerful. And by the intelligence agencies. Give them an idea.
Concentrating on hard data, when the satellite images came in of the snuff movie facility near Toledo, Spain, where we think Madeleine was destined, the images showed the facility surrounded by pitiful small graves, and the numbers of children buried there probably ran into the hundreds, because we don't know how many bodies were buried in each grave. But the French, most of those children had been kidnapped in Paris. A lot of them were Algerians or Moroccans because they're easy to kidnap, easy to get away with. And we know the French had been losing hundreds of kids out of Paris because they were Muslim. Nobody gave a damn. And we also know that another source of children was Sao Paulo in Brazil. We know there was a route out of Sao Paulo, which is Portuguese speaking, of course. We know there's a route through the Sao Tome and Principe Islands up into Lagos, which was near Praia de Luz. And of course, Madeleine McCann goes out through Lagos. That ring, that pipeline of kidnapped kiddies, you're looking at hundreds. You've only got to look at the history of the number of kids disappearing from the streets of Sao Paulo. They were ending up in Europe and they were being abused. We're talking hundreds and hundreds and hundreds.
So let me ask you a follow-up. Let me ask you a follow-up question quickly. Sorry, Mike, because time is rapidly running out and I hate this. Let me ask you a follow-up question quickly then. If thousands of children whom were sometimes often wrongfully taken from their parents through forced adoption into secret family courts. Now, we learned that over 10,000 children a year go off the books, they go missing. Now, that's children aged between 14, 15, 16, whom are in the care of the state in a foster home. Thousands go missing. It's a scandal that never gets mentioned in the mainstream media. Are some of these children being trafficked?
I have no doubt about it. Absolutely no doubt at all. That's exactly what happened with the Savile paedophile ring. Local authorities were sending, who report to the Cabinet Office mostly, local authorities reporting to the Cabinet Office were destroying records and sending kids by the dozen, and this is per local authority, down to Jersey. So nobody's quite sure how many kids disappeared out of Hope Children's Home in Jersey, but it was quite a number. And because records weren't kept, the police still aren't sure how many missing kids we're dealing with.
Are we terrifying mums and dads listening to the program? Should we be a bit more careful?
I think mothers and fathers, this is the mistake the Germans made with Madeleine McCann. They kidnapped a child who had loving parents, and I have never ever suggested that the McCanns were other than loving parents, and I've always firmly ruled out any involvement by them in the kidnap. They clearly weren't involved, nor could they have stopped it because the kidnap team was armed with silenced pistols. And had they tried to stop it, any adult trying to stop the kidnap would have been shot. That's the only comfort I can give the poor McCanns. I think parents, on the whole, their children will be safe because precisely because they've got parents to look after them. The problem comes with kids who are street kids, as we have in Sao Paulo and Paris. You have large numbers of street kids who don't have parents.
Nobody looking out for them.
Orphans, they may have run away. And the problem comes with kids in local authorities. They are vulnerable precisely because they don't have parents. I don't want to alarm parents. I think most kids, the overwhelming majority of kids with parents in loving homes will be safe precisely because there's somebody to keep an eye out for them.
Michael, I want to. We're going to leave it there for now. You know, you're always welcome back on. We should do a show about what happened to Madeleine McCann and others. I recommend Spy Hunter. I read Spy Hunter in London a few years ago. It's a fabulous book. It can be found at any good online retailer. Is there a link, Michael? Should people just go to veteranstoday.com to find you?
No, well, they can go to Veterans Today and read my weekly columns. I encourage them to do that. That's great. It's always nice to get the readership numbers up. But the book can be purchased online from June Press, junepress.com, And if you also order it through Amazon, so it's not too difficult to buy.
Write another one, Michael. Will you write another book about
yes,
this?
I'm planning to write. The next book is intended to be a bit more popular. I'm proposing to call it Great Deagle Disasters, but it's not yet. It's not yet.
Right.
I might be publishing a book this year. It'll be 2017, perhaps 2018 before our next book comes out.
You're a great campaigner, Michael. There's no putting down. There's no killing a good thing. Really appreciate you coming back on the programme. Thanks for your insights.
My pleasure, Richie. Thank you.
Look after yourself. Bye for now. Michael Shrimpton there on the line to us from his home in London on Thursday's Richie Allen Show in association with DavidIke.com.